Welcome to Business 360. I'm Archana Solanki. Here are the headlines we're tracking this hour. The Federal Reserve does a hawkish pause, holds off on what would have been its 11th consecutive interest rate hike, indicates 2 more rate hikes later this year. Fed chair says they have covered a lot of ground and the full effects of the tightening are yet to be felt. Market fails to hold opening gains. Nifty and Sensex end close to 0.5% lower. Financials lead the fall. Mid-caps outperform. Meanwhile, market capitalization of BSE companies hits a record high of 292 lakh crore rupees in intraday trade. No immediate relief for Z promoter Subhash Chandra and Puneet Goenka. Securities Appellate Tribunal refuses to impose a stay on the SEBI order, barring them from holding key managerial positions. National Companies Law Tribunal will hear a case involving the Z-Sony merger tomorrow. Hero MotoCorp comes under the Corporate Affairs Ministry's lens. The government initiates investigation against the auto major. Sources say investigation takes cognizance of income tax probe to initiate action. Hero MotoCorp says it hasn't received any communication on the matter. Supreme Court dismisses Coal India's plea challenging Competition Commission's jurisdiction over it in a 7-year-old order. The Apex Court says that Coal India cannot seek an exemption from Competition Act just because it is a public sector undertaking under the Coal Mines Act. The Competition Tribunal had upheld CCI's order against Coal India in an abuse of dominant market position case a decade back. Chris Capital bets big on Lenskart, invests $100 million via primary and secondary share sales. Lenskart has raised a total capital of $1.6 billion so far. This includes $850 million raised in the past year. 6 months after India's Olympian wrestlers began a protest, the Delhi police files a charge sheet against Wrestling Federation former chief BrijBhushan Singh. 6 women wrestlers accuse Bhushan of assault, stalking and making sexually colored remarks. Police filed cancellation report regarding one case allegedly involving a minor girl, citing lack of evidence. Gujarat braces for very severe cyclonic storm Biparjoy. Over 74,000 people have been evacuated to safer destinations. The Met Department has issued a red alert for Saurashtra and Kutch districts. The Indian Army and the Indian Air Force have been kept on standby. A report by a committee of British lawmakers reveals that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson deliberately misled the Parliament over lockdown parties. Also finds that Johnson was part of the campaign of abuse and intimidation of MPs. Says he would have faced a 90-day suspension from the House if he hadn't quit. All right, let's start with the day's market action. Market failed to hold opening gains to end at the day's low. Nifty and Sensex fell close to 0.5%. Financials led the fall, with the Nifty bank seeing cuts of over 1%. Mid-caps continue to outperform the blue chips. That index ended 0.25% in the green. Meanwhile, the market capitalization of BSE companies hit a record high of 292 lakh crore rupees in intraday trade. The big global story we are tracking: the Federal Reserve kept its rates unchanged as expected, finally taking a break from what has been a historic rate hike cycle. However, economists are terming the Fed decision as a hawkish pause. And here's why. The Federal Reserve indicated that there would be 2 more rate hikes this year. The projection that took economists and markets watchers by surprise. We will get you more on that in a bit, but first let's listen in to crucial commentary from Fed Chair.
Price stability is the responsibility of the Federal Reserve. Without price stability, the economy doesn't work for anyone. In particular, without price stability, we will not achieve a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all. Since early last year, the FOMC has significantly tightened the stance of monetary policy. We have raised our policy interest rate by 5 percentage points, and we've continued to reduce our securities holdings at a brisk pace. We've covered a lot of ground, and the full effects of our tightening have yet to be felt. In light of how far we've come in tightening policy, the uncertain lags with which monetary policy affects the economy, and potential headwinds from credit tightening, today we decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. You know, we don't know the full extent of the consequences of the banking turmoil that we've seen. It would be early to see those, but we don't know what the extent is. We'll have some more time to see that unfold. I mean, it's just the idea that we're trying to get this right, and this is, if you think of the two things as separate variables, then I think that the skip, I shouldn't call it a skip, the decision makes sense.
All right, Lata Venkatesh is here with the key takeaways from the Fed policy. Lata, over to you.
Yes, clearly it was an as-expected pause, and the statement offered only one justification for why the rates were not hiked or cut, and that is it was to allow the committee to assess incoming data and their impact on policy. So that's why we turn to the so-called dot plot. Now, what is the dot plot? This is a chart on which all the 18 members vote on how many more hikes they see. And just look at the split. 9 of these 18 members have voted for 2 more hikes. Let's look at all the votes and you will get an idea of how it's not just hawkish but even more hawkish. There was only one asking for only 1 hike, but just 4 members. 9 members asking for 2 hikes. 2 of them asking for 3 more hikes and 1 of them asking for 4 more hikes. And there were just 2 people saying that no more hikes are needed. The Fed statement is also accompanied by what is called new macro projections. It's called Summary of Economic Projections, or SEP. Now, the Fed has actually upped its growth forecast for the 4th quarter from earlier 0.4% to now 1%. That's a huge jump in the growth forecast. Also, it has lowered the expected unemployment by the year end from earlier 4.5 to 4.1%. So again, showing strength of the economy to employ more people. Core inflation is again expected to get worse to 3.9% versus an earlier forecast of 3.6%. The only thing which showed moderation was the headline CPI, which is now cut to 3.2%. The earlier forecast was 3.3%. What were the key takeaways from the Powell press conference? Well, again, the only dovish statement he made was July is still a live meeting, and the members did not decide conclusively about July in the June meeting. That's about all he said. Now, for the hawkish part of the statement, it was how he scorched all hopes of any cuts in the current year, 2023. Nearly all members expect that we have to hike somewhat this year, was what Powell said. Now, what will make them cut? Powell gave some indications. He says the impact of the hikes is there, but the committee needs to see 1, more growth slowdown, 2, labor market to loosen up, and 3, supply lines to get better. He expects the first disinflation signs to come from the housing market, especially from the new lease rentals. He also said that more than 1 year of rate hikes have not yet worked through the economy. All said and done, for me, the biggest takeaway is that growth is very strong. Let's prepare for higher growth forecasts even for our country.
All right, thank you, Lata, for that comprehensive update. Meanwhile, China's youth jobless rate has edged up to record highs for the 2nd consecutive month. This is the latest in a series of data pointing to continued economic weakness in China. The unemployment rate for people between 16 and 24 years of age rose to 20.8%, up from what was already a record of 20.4% in April. This according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Meanwhile, overall urban unemployment remained at 5.2%. The union government is confident of hitting its GDP target of 6.5%. That's the word coming in from the Chief Economic Advisor V. Ananth Nageshwaran, speaking at a FICCI event in Chennai. The Chief Economic Advisor said that a potential upside or downside to this figure would be around 20 to 30 basis points. Nageshwaran also said that the inflation will not be a challenge for households in FY24.
Both Ministry of Finance and RBI consider this 6.5%, the risks surrounding this number, to be evenly balanced. In other words, we could exceed this number by 20-30 basis points, or we could fall short by 20-30 basis points. So the risk of 6.5% is tilted evenly between potential downside and potential upside. And this kind of harmony in terms of the expectations from both the Ministry of Finance and RBI suggests that we are highly confident of hitting this number, 6.5% real GDP growth.
The government has announced that it will issue new tranches of sovereign gold bonds in collaboration with the Reserve Bank of India. The first tranche of the bond will open for subscription from June 19th to June 23rd, while the second tranche will open in September. The issue date for first tranche is 27th of June. In a major setback for Coal India, the Supreme Court has ruled that the competition law applies to the public sector company. The apex court rejected the Coal India's plea that Competition Act doesn't apply to them since it comes under the ambit of the Coal Mines Act. The apex court also held that Coal India's appeal is against the competition watchdog's order will be decided on merits. Remember, in 2014, the CCI had held Coal India guilty of abusing its dominant market position. All right, it's a setback to Z promoters Subhash Chandra and Puneet Goenka. Securities Appellate Tribunal has refused to impose a stay on the SEBI order, barring them from holding key managerial positions of any listed company. Now, the tribunal said it will not pass an interim order, citing that it would be virtually allowing further appeal. Shilpa Ranipeta joins us with the details. Shilpa, what does it mean for the promoters now?
Well, no relief has been granted to Puneet Goenka or Subhash Chandra in the SEBI order that had barred both of them from holding any key positions in a listed entity until further notice. Now, in the appeal in the Securities Appellate Tribunal, or SAT, has said that it will hear the matter now on Monday for a final order, and it has asked SEBI to file a reply within 48 hours. Now, SAT did not pass any interim order because it said that passing an interim stay or an interim order would virtually be allowing the appeal. Now, in a rather heated argument in the courtroom, Puneet Goenka's counsel argued that SEBI's order was not a show-cause notice order and that a post-decision hearing could have been granted, and that SEBI has jumped to unwarranted conclusions. Now, what bearing today's hearing and the fact that no interim stay was granted it will be interesting to see what bearing that will have on tomorrow's hearing at NCLT. Now, remember, tomorrow NCLT is hearing the Z-Sony merger matter, where Puneet Goenka is to be MD and CEO for a period of 5 years. Now, while SAT has said that the appellant can move for adjournment for tomorrow's matter at NCLT, it will really be interesting to see how tomorrow's proceedings go on and what the final order will be on Monday. Back to you.
Right, thank you, Shilpa, for that. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has initiated an investigation against Hero Motocorp. We learn from sources that the investigation will take cognizance of income tax probe to initiate action against the company. Timsi Jaipuria joins us now with the details. Timsi, what are your sources telling you on this?
Well, my sources are clearly indicating that Ministry of Corporate Affairs, under two sections of the Companies Act, that is Section 210 and Section 216, under these two sections, MCA's wing of DG investigation has issued investigation orders against Hero Motocorp. These investigation orders have been already sent to the company on 5th of June, and what we pick up further from sources is that this particular investigation has been ordered after receiving a lot of information post the investigation and the surveys that were conducted against Hero Motocorp by Income Tax Department, and that is how, under exchange of information, they found certain violations, and for which they now want to do detailed investigation in the books of accounts, in the shareholding pattern, and yes, to know who's the beneficial ownership of the shares, etc., of a public listed company, and that's why these two sections have been invoked right now for an investigation. When we sent a query, detailed query to Ministry of Corporate Affairs, well, our query remains unanswered, and what we were given an off-record comment was that, yes, notices have been served, and this being an investigative matter, the government would not like to comment on it.
All right. Thank you, Timsi, for that update. Meanwhile, Chris Capital has invested $100 million in eyewear brand Lenskart via primary and secondary share purchases. The private equity firm has said that the investment will support Lenskart's growth plans and strengthen its position as a global eyewear leader. This brings the company's total capital infusion to $815 million in the past year. A United Kingdom Parliament committee has ruled that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson deliberately misled lawmakers over parties at 10 Downing Street when COVID lockdown norms were in place across the country. The committee report also suggested that Johnson should not be entitled to Parliament access allowed to former MPs. Johnson has maintained his innocence, calling the report a lie. Sanjay Suri joins us with more on this. Sanjay, more trouble brewing in for Johnson.
The Privileges Committee of the British Parliament that inquired into Partygate and Boris Johnson's role in that has concluded that Boris Johnson deliberately misled Parliament. It has confirmed that it was preparing a more than 10-day suspension for Boris Johnson that would have led him to seek re-election, and seeing that coming his way, Boris Johnson of course resigned. He jumped before he could be pushed. Further to that, the committee says that given the contempt Boris Johnson has expressed for the committee through the process and in resigning, would have led the committee to recommend a 90-day suspension. That of course is neither here nor there, 10 days or 90 days, because Boris Johnson resigned ahead of that. But further to that, again, the committee now says that it is recommending a refusal of a pass for Boris Johnson to even visit Parliament, which is normally given to ex-MPs. The committee has now confirmed what the whole nation, in fact, the whole world was seeing for itself. Boris Johnson has announced that he will be back, and that is notwithstanding what we have seen and heard from the committee. How he will explain that to his party, to the people, to effect a comeback politically is far from certain, but that at least is his stated intention.
All right, it's time for a short break, but coming up next, 6 months after India's Olympian wrestlers began a protest, the Delhi police has filed a charge sheet against Wrestling Federation former chief BrijBhushan Singh. Details when we return. Welcome back. The Delhi police has filed a charge sheet against outgoing Wrestling Federation President BrijBhushan Singh in the case alleging sexual harassment of female wrestlers. This comes 6 months after the wrestlers began protesting, demanding his arrest. The charges include assault or use of criminal force against women and stalking. Shivani Bazaz is here with the details.
Well, yes, the latest in the wrestlers' case against WFI chief BrijBhushan Singh is that Delhi police has filed a charge sheet in the FIRs registered by several wrestlers. The charge sheet was filed in Delhi's Rouse Avenue court, and the Delhi police charge sheet mentions offences under various sections, including 354, assault of criminal force to women with an intent to outrage her modesty, 354A, making sexually coloured remarks, 354D, stalking of IPC. This is against BrijBhushan Singh, and offences under section 109, 354 and 354A against former WFI Assistant Secretary Vinod Tomar. The matter is now listed on June 22nd. Also, in another case of the minor wrestler, the Delhi police has submitted a cancellation report in Delhi's Patiala House Court based on the victims of on the statement of the victim and her father. The hearing in that matter now is scheduled to be on 4th of July. Important to know that a cancellation report is filed in cases where no corroborative evidence is found. However, it is also important to understand that the cancellation report doesn't mean that the minor's FIR has been quashed. The court will sit and decide on that in the next date. In Delhi with Vijay Pradeep Kumar, this is Shivani Bajaj for CNBC-TV18.
After the registration of the FIR, the investigation was taken up by SIT, and subsequent to that, we have filed the charge sheet against BrijBhushan Singh as well as Vinod Tomar. The section invoked are 354, 354A and 354D, etc.
Also, ma'am, there has been a cancellation under the POCSO Act for the minor wrestlers allegation. Can you tell us more about that?
Very true. There was another FIR that was registered in which we had invoked POCSO, as the complainant had stated that his daughter is a minor and she had also been molested. So when we took up the investigation after registration of the case, the statement of both the complainant as well as the alleged victim were recorded, and based on those statements, we had to file the cancellation.
Ma'am, there are also, people are wondering whether or not this means that the FIR has been quashed. Can you tell us more what the cancellation report means actually?
Cancellation report has been filed in the court. So now court has to decide what needs to be done, whether it is whether the court accepts it or not. So the further act will be done by the court in both the cases. Where the charge sheet has been filed, the court will be framing the charges, and in the cancellation they will be accepting our report.
So, ma'am, can you also tell us on what grounds is usually the cancellation report filed by the police?
See, that's a question of law, so you can call legal experts, and I can only comment on you that it was a statement of the complainant himself as well as the alleged victim that was a crux in our case.
All right, heavy rains and gusty winds rush through parts of Gujarat as Cyclone Biparjoy inches closer to the coast. The Met Department has predicted the landfall to hit the Jakhau port of western Gujarat this evening. The landfall is now expected to be between 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Nearly 1 lakh people living near the coasts have been evacuated by the Gujarat government. Teams of the NDRF, SDRF along with the Army and Air Force have been deployed near disaster-prone areas. Vinay Deshpande gets us this report from Dwarka.
Well, yes, we are in Dwarka, Devbhumi Dwarka, which is going to be one of the places which are going to be affected after the landfall of Cyclone Biparjoy. As you can see, the wind speeds have increased substantially over the last few hours. In fact, there are several locations where maybe trees, maybe hoardings, they have all come down. Let me show you the visuals of Gomti Ghat here in Dwarka. We are at the footsteps of Dwarkadhish temple, the temple which has been completely shut for the devotees today, in view of the fact that thousands of devotees throng this place every day in order to seek darshan of Dwarkadhish. Just a few hours ago, we had seen that a temporary pathway that was created here, the roof of that pathway had flown away. So right now, police have evacuated this entire area where we are standing. In fact, Section 144 has been imposed in this entire region. And as we see, shops are also shut here. The wind speeds have increased substantially, making it quite difficult for me to even stand steadily at a location where we are standing.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business 360. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC TV18 for more news and updates.